guys, how are you doing? I hope you're all well and I hope you're having a great day. Today, we got a bit of an unboxing. It's been a while, hasn't it, since I've ordered any bits. So let's have a quick look what we've got. So, first thing we've got is some 1K epoxy primer. So, the reason I've got this, and I was meant to order it ages ago, I just kept forgetting to get it. Epoxy primer is not porous like normal primers are. The problem with normal primers if you're doing a restoration like this and it's going to take you months and months and months, if you spray primer on there, it doesn't offer any protection at all, and it will actually rust through the primer, whereas epoxy primer is not porous. So if you are doing a restoration which is going to take a bit of time, you're better off using epoxy primer because it won't it won't let moisture get through to the metalwork. So I should have got that a while ago, but anyway, I've got it now. So one of the jobs we're going to do today is epoxy prime the bulkhead and the inner wings. We're not going to paint it yet, but it'd be nice to get it in epoxy primer to give it a bit of protection. I will just say, I mentioned in last week's video about the cure rust, so I've been trying that fur tan and cure rust, and I've also noticed with the cure rust itself, if you go along afterwards and rub your hands on it, across it, it comes off just as easy as a fur tan. So I'm in two minds as to which one is better at the moment. I guess I'd leave it up to personal preference, to be honest. I think they're both just as good as each other, to be honest. Can you guess what this is? It's probably a bit obvious, to be honest. Bull Motive mini spares. Used them lots of times before, always really good. Package things up really well. And they'll usually offer free shipping or a discount or something like that. So we have our scuttle panel. So today's video is going to be fitting the scuttle panel, I think. Got a bit of prep work to do yet. As you can see, it is a heritage scuttle panel. Someone did mention about, because I'd only cut the corners off, I could have, they do repair sections, you can get the corners. But just previous experience, I have done that in the past and I've put repair corners on before. But it's maybe my filler work is not as good as it can be, but whenever I've done that in before, it's always been noticeable afterwards when it's in paint. And this being a metallic car, I just think it'll be even more noticeable. So yes, I could have saved myself a few quid, but I think a complete new scuttle will be better. Excuse me. And as well as the scuttle, we have got, cut that out of the way. Not very exciting, it's just the closing panels to go with the scuttle. Can't remember whether I ordered genuine or not. I think I ordered non-genuine. Yeah, they're Magnum panels. They are just the closing panels though, so to be honest, even to the Magnum ones, yeah, they're never a great fit. You have to manipulate them into shape. But yeah, they're 14 quid each, I think. So that's about it. Let's get into it and let's get this scuttle panel fitted. Right, so as I mentioned in today's video, we're gonna fit the scuttle. It's not fitted, it's just laid roughly in place. But just a word of warning for you. So, notice how far the scuttle panel comes up on that A-post, A-pillar there. So I've got plenty of room to play around with because I cut it much lower. But word of warning, if you order a Magnum scuttle or an aftermarket scuttle, they come down much, much lower. You don't get as much of the A-pillar. So be very, very careful before you cut it. Make sure you got the new panel there and you cut it, because they come down to about here on the aftermarket panels. But just lining up quickly, that's all looking pretty good. So now all I've got to do, like I say, I've got to do me epoxy primer now. Let me just get that out of the way. Put that in the car so it doesn't get damaged. So I'm just going to go over this all with a Scotch pad, a green, which is a medium Scotch pad. As I say, this has had the that had cure rust on it, that had the Fernal, but as I say, they're very, very similar. Maybe I was giving the cure rust a bit of a bad rep, because I was actually looking and it looks like it's rusted through, but I don't think it is. I think it's just where it goes brown. But anyway, gonna Scotch pad that all up, get some epoxy primer on there. Obviously I need to mask up the places we've got to spot weld, because that'll have to be etch primed. So really, really boring. I'll time lapse this bit and speed it up, because it's really nothing exciting. Right then, I've done flipping loads off camera, which isn't good for YouTube. Means I don't have much footage. But that's all in epoxy primer now. Prepped it all, cleaned it all up, degreased it, and then painted it. And what I've done first, obviously, is anywhere that's weld through, I've weld through primered first, which is the silver, and then masked that off, and then used epoxy primer on the rest of it. So yeah, everywhere that needs spot welding has got weld through primer, everywhere else is epoxy primer. But it looks pretty good, doesn't it? Obviously the next job is we're going to fit the scuttle, but before this gets paint, obviously it all needs seam sealing now. Always in two minds whether to seam seal before primer or primer before seam seal. I think it's better to primer first and then seam seal, and then primer again, and then paint. Just a bit of added protection. But what you do find sometimes is the seam sealer will reactivate the primer, or it might react with it. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And our scuttle panel, this is all up here, and this has all been weld through primered now, which is good. So that's pretty much ready to go on. Just got to get it all lined up and then make our final cuts on here. So I'll probably film this bit, we'll get it on, we'll line it up. I do need to do a bit more cleaning up and get rid of the old lip there. So bear with me, let me get the camera set up and let's get this scuttle panel fitted.
Hey mini enthusiasts, how are you doing? Thought I'd add a bit of narration to this one. So let's get this scuttle panel fitted. That's really exciting actually, because it's the first sort of body panel going back on the car after all the cutting, grinding and welding structurally, the seals, the floors, everything else. So yeah, really, really pleased. I did actually mess up here, because the plan was to fit the bonnet and help use the bonnet to align the scuttle, but I got a bit carried away with myself. I fitted the scuttle and started cutting already. In a moment I realised, and then put the bonnet back on. There we go. So the tool I was using there to make the cut up the side of that A-pillar, the normal sort of cutting disc that I use on the angle grinder is too big a circumference to get right in the corner. So I bought some Dremel, I think they're called Easy Speed Click cutting wheels. They are really, really good, really useful for getting into tight areas. They're not very cheap. I think for a pack of 10 with a little mandrel to go with it, I paid about 20 quid. But it is really worth it because it allows you to make that cut. Alternatively, you could probably just about get in there with a hacksaw. So yeah, like I say, the plan was to use the bonnet to help me realign it. I sort of forgot that, so I've got the bonnet back on now. In a moment, you'll see me scratching my head. Now, I didn't actually realise when you look at where the hinges go on, you just assume that there's like 3 holes on the bulkhead. There's one hole at the front which looks like where the hinges should go, and then there's 2 holes behind it. So I fitted it on that front hole, and yeah, nothing lines up. So I had to go and take the cover off Sprout and have a look where it was fitted on Sprout. So if you have the hinges off and you put the bonnet back on and it looks completely wrong, it's probably because the hinges are in the wrong holes. Now I spend absolutely ages here with the mole grips, lining things up, checking, trying to make sure the scuttle panel is in the right place. The reason I'm doing that is just any error at the back here at the scuttle panel, even like 1mm out, by the time you get to the front panel and lining that up, that 1mm could turn into 5mm. So it's really imperative that you start out with the scuttle panel and the bonnet in the right places. There, just making the cut with a little Dremel there. So very, very useful, that tool. You might be able to see it on the bulkhead there, where the bonnet hinges goes. The brackets have like 3 holes in them, so make sure you get it back in the right hole. Don't make the same mistakes I did. I'm just removing the final pieces of metal up that A panel. Now on this car, it seems to vary so much. Sometimes the spot welds are easy to find and drill out. Sometimes it's roller welded rather than spot welded, but on this car it was quite difficult to identify the spot welds to drill them out. So sometimes you just end up having to make a bit of a guess and just start drilling and then work your way around it. So as the names go up on the left hand side there, just thank you very much. Thanks, cheers for the beers, really appreciate your support, thank you. Just putting a bit of weld through primer back on now. And then starting on the other side. Like I say, it's just it's very, very hard to see where the spot welds are, so I just drill out quite close and then hammer and chisel and just go along and you can get rid of them. And then just final clean up with a flat disc. Thankfully, weld through primer does dry really, really quickly. Especially if you've got a hot air gun like this, it literally dries in 5 minutes. So bonnet back on, and we can put the scuttle panel back on now. and start getting it welded into place. Like I said earlier, it's really, really important just spending your time here. Check, double check and treble check just to make sure you're comfortable that the panel's in the right place. I'm just trimming the top of that part of that A-post there on the scuttle, and I actually trimmed off a bit too much, as you'll see later on in the video. And as you can see here, me pulling that bit of panel out there, just where it's been hammer and chiselled and manipulated around, it does sometimes distort it a bit, so it's quite weak, that panel, once you start taking it apart. I had invested in some new safety goggles. My old ones I couldn't really see out of anymore. I thought it was just my eyesight going bad, old age and that, but it was all the lenses scratched up. Now I usually use those Uvex. I've bought them before, I've used them before with work. They're really, really good, so I just buy them off eBay. But the set I've got this time, they seem like they're for someone with a massive head. They seem a little bit oversized. They're like ski goggles, but they do the job. Now you see me there, and I did it when I do the seals as well. I go along and I mark with a pencil, lead pencil, where I'm going to put the spot welds, just so it's not nice and neat and tidy. Just to give you some idea, I use just under an inch spacing, probably about 3/4 of an inch between each spot weld. So spot welder, again, really invaluable tool. It saves so much time with doing a job like this. I would not want to be plug welding all of these welds. The only problem is the spot welder is really, really heavy, and trying to get it into tight areas, it is a little bit tricky. I think when it comes to doing the front panel, actually, Mark's spot welder is a little bit smaller than mine, and it's got angled tongs on it. I think I might borrow Mark's for doing the front panel to the wing join, because mine I really struggled with Project Bruce. But you can just see how fast it is. And it's really important, I've mentioned it in previous videos with a spot welder, to make sure the tip has got a nice angle cut on it, and the tongs are clean and got a good point on them. There is a tool I've borrowed from Mark which cuts the tips for you, and it gives you kind of a perfect spot weld. Really, really useful. So that's the near side spot welding in now. Move around to the offside. Just a bit of tweaking and fettling to get it in the right place. Never have enough mole grips when doing stuff like this. I'll show a bit of close-up of this afterwards, but the problem you get there is the fresh air vent, or the air vent for the windscreen, gets in the way of the tongs for the spot welder, so I just folded the little lip over and I'll fold it back once we finish. And I just applied a bit of masking tape over it there just to stop electrical contact between the top dash rail and the spot welder tongs. There we go, just folding that lip back now. And I was pulling up on the mould grips and managed to smack myself in the face there. Won't do that again. Looking good, really pleased.
Right, so I think we'll call it there for this episode. Let's turn around, let's have a look how we got on today. So, scuttle panels all welded in. There are a couple of welds that I still need to do. These corners there, I can probably get the spot welder in there. But we're pretty much all spot welded on now, the whole way round. Probably the only bits that I messed up a little bit, you can see I've got a huge gap here. I won't have too much trouble filling that with weld. I've got a big gap on the other side. I cut it too high. I cut it too low down, sorry. But we got all our spot welds on. You'll see me having to manipulate this corner here. When you're chiseling out those spot welds, this is quite weak here when you've taken the scuttle out, so it's quite easy to bend stuff. So, as far as gaps go, I'm pretty happy with that. Like I say, this is my sort of strategy, using the bonnet to line the front end all up again. Gaps down the side. This is a little bit bigger than I want it at the moment, but that is no problem at all, as long as the gap is consistent, because I can move the bonnet back on the hinges. But I'm pretty pleased with that. And as someone else mentioned in a previous video, once the wings are on, actually, the bonnet will probably actually lift up ever so slightly, and that gives me, that just narrows the gap a little bit. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. Little tip for you if you're doing this, because these vents get in the way from the spot welder, but I just folded that back with the pliers, hammered it down, and then obviously I can fold it back up again. Now what I need to do is go around, just check all my gaps. I can't remember, I think I wrote it, didn't I? 41.3. So I'll go round and I'll check all my gaps. The gaps shouldn't be too big. If anything, they should be a little bit too small, but that's not a problem. If you got, you know, 1/2 mil too small, you can take that off with a flat wheel. It's really important to make sure you get the gaps right in the corners here though. That's really important. And that is obviously all relying on your alignment round here. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased. It's the first panel back on, isn't it? I do obviously still need to fit the closing panels. Wrong one. Try again. They take a fair bit of manipulating to get right. So I'll be doing a bit of hammer and dollying to get that right. And obviously, before we go back on, up inside there, I will just spray with Hammerite. The same with under the bonnet now. I can go along and I can spray up underneath that scuttle. Obviously the bulkhead will all get painted at some point as well. So pretty pleased with that. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, remember to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment if you want to. And if you're not a subscriber, do consider subscribing. And I will catch you again on the next one, where we may well be... What are we going to be doing on the next one? Oh, I probably need to get that subframe back in, stripped down a bit and back in, and then we'll be putting the front end on. Looking forward to that. Cheers, thanks for watching this week.